folks, my name is Lucy Pauley. I'm from the Wyoming Department of Ag. I'm the coordinator for the Ag Mediation Program, so I help farmers and ranchers who are involved in a wide variety of issues. I know you're shocked that other farmers and ranchers have conflicts, but they do from time to time. That's supposed to be a joke. There's a lot of issues going on. What I'm going to talk to you about today is just kind of a quick overview on some strategies for managing conflict. This is usually like a half-day workshop where we really get into some different techniques and things that we have. So I'm going to give you just a quick overview and then hopefully point you to some resources that if this is something that you're really interested in, you can follow up or come to one of my bigger classes. So I want to start off with finding out what types of conflicts are you involved in. Does this look like your irrigation district meeting or your maybe your grazing permit meeting every year? Hopefully not as many weapons or what are those things called? Shields. What do you got? What kind of conflicts are you involved in? Come on, folks.
No, we're all peaceable people.
You're just sitting in here because there was nothing else interesting to go to today? What do you got? Or what have you seen in your area? What are other people facing? How about that?
Transition of farm from one generation to the next.
Absolutely. That is an area that is ripe for conflict, isn't it? I'm a town person. There's no property in our family to transition, but I am actually finding myself in the middle of a how to take care of the older generation conflict right now. And you would think as a mediator I'd be handling that beautifully, right? Not. It's been really, really, really stressful.
So tell us more about why it's a challenge.
It's a challenge because there's people spread out all over the country trying to take care of folks. There's a lot of feelings that pop up throughout
That's what I was asking.
Yeah.
We're
We're emotionally involved. Sometimes we're dealing with people that aren't incredibly rational about the options that are available to them. Just lots of stuff. What else?
Lease agreements.
Okay. Leases, leasing pastures, leasing livestock, leasing equipment, leasing land. I'm in Fremont County. I gotta say, every summer I will get a call from somebody in Fremont County about water, right? Not getting enough water. There was one year that a guy called me and he was mad he was getting too much water, and I wanted to be like, dude, just figure out a way to use it, because this is not gonna happen a lot. I get a lot of small acreage calls. People who think that fence out means every animal, right? I had somebody call me one time, I don't think it was Fremont County, it might have been. They had goats, and the neighbor had told them that it was their job to keep, no, the neighbor had goats. The neighbor had told them that it was their job to keep the neighbor's goats out of their property. I was like, no, that's only for cattle. It's fence in for everything else. And then I also told them that somebody had given me advice, when you have goats, you build a fence and you spit, and if your spit can go through the fence, so can a goat. They really didn't like that advice. But there's a lot of issues, right? Anybody love conflict? Anybody like a good fight? Anybody wish conflict would never happen? Yeah, a fair amount. One of the things I want to point out to you today is that when we're talking about conflict, we're talking about more than just a disagreement or a little people feel differently about something. A conflict is a situation in which people perceive a threat to their well-being. That threat can be financial, that threat can be emotional, it can be a threat to their power, but you really have that perceived threat. And so what I try to tell people is, these little dust-ups over time can lead to a conflict, but you have to think about somebody is perceiving that threat to their well-being. And so if we can help them see that threat isn't really real, or if we can figure out a way to resolve that, we have a much better chance of managing that conflict. We have a lot of different causes of conflict, and I just kind of like to go through this to show you where everything can come out of. Sometimes we'll have a conflict over an outcome. You know, in the family, who's inheriting the farm or ranch? Who's getting the biggest share? Who's getting the loan? Who's getting the program? That final outcome is what people are upset about. Sometimes it can also be the process that was used to make that decision. Somebody may understand why they didn't get the outcome that they want, but they don't like how they were treated. They didn't like the process that was used to come to that decision. They're going to have a conflict. Sometimes it's principles and values. If you feel like you weren't treated well, or if you weren't allowed to have a voice, again, you understand that outcome, you don't like how you were treated. Finally, we can also just have miscommunication. I've got a couple mediations happening right now, different agencies, different situations. The majority of them come down to miscommunication. You said X, they heard Y, and since then you've been going down these two different paths. Spoiler alert, communication is one of the ways that we manage conflict. So what happens during a conflict? This is the big duh moment of the day. Emotions rise, people stop talking to each other, people talk through other folks, we stop listening to each other, we take sides, we kind of forget what the original conflict was about, but we add a whole bunch of new issues, and basically some people leave, some people exit the relationship, exit the, move out of the area, whatever it is. A lot of folks just kind of hunker down and hope it goes away. What do you think, is conflict always bad? I'm kind of painting a bad picture of conflict, but are there any benefits to conflict, do you think? We had a conflict with the mother country. So far it's turned out pretty good, right? Some days I feel better saying that than others. But this is an example of, we had a pretty big conflict. We found a way to create something new. What are some of the other advantages to conflict, do you think?
Like I said, understanding.
Yeah, better understanding of everything that's going on? Sure. What else?
Filter good ideas.
Sure. There can be some creativity that comes out of it, right? Hopefully. Sure. Some folks can find some skills they didn't know they had. If you come through something really tough and you come out on the other side, you may discover that you had some leadership there that you didn't realize you had before, or you've got some creativity or whatever it is. And that's really hard for people who don't like conflict, right? We don't want to find out that way, but that is one of the benefits. It can change the way we think about things. It can help us identify problems. If I have a conflict at the Department of Ag, because of regulation that we passed, and we keep having these problems over this regulation, it's a good sign for us, hey, this is worded weirdly. People aren't understanding what this is about. There's a chance for us to fix that. So there are definitely some advantages. The problem we also have, though, is how people respond to conflict. This is another cause of conflict. Fainting goats, anybody have fainting goats in the crowd? Seen them before? When these guys get startled, they fall over, lay like that for a few seconds, pop up and go on about their day. Not a bad strategy, if it's your boss who wants you to do a project, but if it's a coyote, this is probably not the best strategy, right, for conflict resolution. We expect people to respond in the same way that we do. So if you're somebody that likes to get in there and get it figured out and have loud conversations, and they're a fainting goat, that's going to add to the conflict. You're going to think, why don't they think this is important? Why are they just hiding? Why aren't they wanting to talk to me? But we have to recognize that everybody has different responses, and that's okay. Some people want time to think about things. Some people want to go away and craft their argument or craft their conversation. It's important to understand what your style is and then be thinking about what the other side's style. We don't have time to do this today, but I'd encourage you, Google Conflict Styles Assessment. It's a free tool online. It's quick, takes about 10-15 minutes. You answer a bunch of questions. It'll tell you if you're a avoider, that's your goat, your fainting goat. You can be a problem solver, somebody that likes to get in there and fix it. You can be a competer. That's somebody who wants to have everything done their way right now. And there's a couple of other ones. The key thing from an exercise like this is that each style is appropriate in certain situations and each style is not appropriate in certain situations. I'm driving a state car today back to Cheyenne. If somebody cuts me off and flips me off, that's a conflict I can avoid, right? I don't need to engage that person. I'm driving a state car, so I can't use the nonverbal language that I would use if I was driving my personal car. I don't need to, right? I can avoid that conflict. If this room suddenly bursts into flames, we don't need the avoiders going, there's not a problem, everything's fine. We need the computers telling us we're going out this door and we're going now. There are going to be conflicts that arise where you need to make a decision and you need to get things resolved quickly, and that's when that style is appropriate. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that if you're interested in finding out what your style is. The other good thing about this tool is that it's helpful for people that you work with regularly. You probably know what their style is, but having them go through this assessment just gives you some more insight into how they handle things. So there's a lot of different responses to conflict. Some people do nothing, like the goats. They yield and change their mind. They yield and don't change their mind. Fine, do it your way, but I still think I'm right. There's some people, like I said, that will leave or exit. Some people will negotiate. They'll try to, come up with something that everybody can live with. Some people will negotiate and try to win. Some people will, excuse me, try to get help with the negotiation. Go to a friend, go to a colleague, help me figure out how to solve this. Some people will go to a decision maker. They'll go to a judge. They'll go to somebody else and say, solve this for us. Those are all the different ways that people respond to conflict. So I've got a quick little kind of overview of how we encourage people to manage conflicts. The first one is communicate. Like I told you before, so many of the conflicts that we see through our mediation program are because people stopped talking. Things got tough, things got stressful, and we just stopped communicating. We'll talk about some communication skills. I'm going to give you a little insight into some good negotiation techniques, and then we'll briefly talk about mediation and litigation at the end. So, the big thing with communication is we don't know what we don't know, right? We don't know, we think we know everything about a conflict, but there's usually a bunch of stuff that we don't know. As a mediator, when I'm not invested in the situation with the people, my main job is to help folks communicate. What I heard you say is blank. What I heard you say, and get everybody on that same page. So in communication, the first step is listening, is to really figure out, what are they trying to tell me? What do they want? Is it something that I can even give them? What really is the problem here? We'll talk about that in a second. Ooh, I just lost the thing. The other one is to, and it's easy for me to say listen, but really listen. Listen to what they're saying, how they're saying it, the body language they're using, and make sure you're getting the whole message. The other good strategy for communication is to ask open-ended questions, questions that can't be answered with a yes or no. Tell me more about this, instead of trying to think of, will you pay for the fencing? Will you do this? Those are not yes or no questions. Those are yes or no questions. Ask the open-ended questions. That can go a long way towards finding out more about the story. Let's talk about negotiation. This is from, do I have a picture of the book in here? This is a short little book. Highly recommend. Anybody read it? Yay! Would you like to come up and do this part? Okay, you're good.
You're doing well.
This is it's a short little book. It's a great resource to have. I'm sure it's available. It's probably available electronically at this point. It's been in publication for years. Highly recommend, because it's a very easy to read, straightforward way of looking at negotiation. In traditional negotiation, you have a series of positions where you're going back and forth until you find, like that dollar amount or whatever it is that everybody can live with. In interest-based negotiation, we're trying to get beyond that. We're trying to come up with something that satisfies everyone, that they can move forward. There's 4 basic principles to this interest-based negotiation. The first one is to separate the people from the problem. Easier said than done. So in all negotiations, you have 2 components. You've got the people, you've got the relationship, and you've got the substance of the problem. There's an example from the book where on my way home today, I'll stop at an antique store here in Riverton, and I'll be looking around, and I'll find this little dish, and the shopkeeper will say, I'll say, how much do you want for this little dish? And the shopkeeper will say, oh, that's a gorgeous antique, isn't it? I'll sell it to you for $75. And I'm like, $75? Are you kidding? It's dirty, it's dented, I'll give you $15. Where is this conversation gonna go? Out the door? Probably, right? Because there's no way I'm gonna pay $75, there's no way he's gonna sell it to me for $15. Maybe we'll find a number that I'm like, oh, I'm still paying too much for this, and he's gonna feel like I'm giving this thing away, right? But probably not. However, he would love for me to be a repeat customer, right? That's the relationship component. And maybe I buy dusty little antique dishes and sell them on the internet for a huge markup. I have a relationship component to that negotiation also. And that's hard to think about when it's people that we don't like, when it's people that we're constantly having a conflict with. But the bottom line is most of us have to have that relationship. When I'm dealing with neighbors that share a fence line and they've been fighting for years over, livestock trespass, whatever it is, like it or not, there's a relationship component. Because are either one of them moving? Probably not, right? They've got to figure out a way to coexist with that shared fence line. We can focus on the problem. We can focus on, payment for crop damage and all that other stuff. But we have to help them figure out a way to coexist the best way that they can. Okay. The other example that I use is I've been on the road a bunch this week. My house is a mess. True story. Like, it is just, it's a pit. I'm going to get home tonight, and my husband's going to say something innocent like, whoo, this kitchen's a mess. Am I going to hear him just stating a problem? No. Right? I'm going to hear an attack, right? Of course I am. I'm tired. I've been on the road all day. I am not going to respond to that well, even though he's innocently just going to be saying, woo, this kitchen's a mess. So when we separate the people from the problem, we have to base the relationship on accurate perceptions, clear emotions, clear communication, moderated emotions, and a forward-looking positive outlook. I'm not going to help the situation if I fire back with, what do you mean the kitchen's a mess? I haven't even been here, right? I'm going to say, okay, I get that you think you're just identifying or stating a fact, but I am taking it as an attack. Can we talk about how to get these lazy teenagers to chip in more, whatever it is, right? To manage that conflict, I have to have that modulated response. My husband knows what I do for a living, and hopefully
He knows better, doesn't he?
He does, yes. He does. He knows better than to even say anything, right? Right. Now, the other part about perceptions, when I see folks in conflict, they are letting their perceptions of the situation rule how they look at it, okay? And usually their perceptions are not 100% accurate. The book has this great line that I think about a lot. It says, don't deduce their intentions from your fears. What we fear, that's what we think the other side's going to do to us. And this is so important because I'm not saying to ignore that little voice that tells you something's off here, but really think about, are you picturing that what you're worried about, that's what they're going to do to you? Now, I'm a state employee. When I listen to the legislative session that's happening right now, my perception is that they are out to get state employees, right? So every debate they have about, salaries or positions or budgets, whatever, I filter that through, they're out to get all of us. And that's hard on me. I have to stop listening to it. Because yes, some of them maybe they're out to reduce the size of government, they're out to reduce budgets. But not every single person in that room is out to get state employees. So I really have to think about, don't deduce my intentions don't deduce their intentions from my fears. And this is tough. When I get folks, especially like in family situations or those neighbor, people that have been working together for a long time, this is hard. Because if they already are mad at each other, if they already distrust each other, they're going to run away with this idea. So something that you can do is really look at the situation. Are they going to do what I'm worried about? Do I have other evidence of that? Or do I need to just take a step back and think about my perceptions, okay? That's your takeaway for the day. Okay, we're going to focus on interests and not positions. Interests are what we want. The positions are those stances that we take that we think are going to help us reach that goal. So, if I as a parent say there's going to be no pets in this house, that's my position, right? What am I worried about? What are my interests?
Keeping the house clean.
Okay, you've seen my kitchen, right? Can you imagine what the rest of the house looks like? Right? That's not my actual kitchen, but yes. Yeah. I'm worried about cleanliness. What else?
Being tied up, taking care of pets.
Okay, who's taking care of it? Whose responsibility? Who's going to walk the darn thing? Who's going to clean up after it? I could be worried about allergies. I could be worried about pet hair. When my darling, at the time, 7-year-old wanted a fluffy, long-haired kitten, what are her interests? Companionship. Should I pick something else, like a little border collie or something that's more relevant to this audience? She wants companionship. Maybe in some alternative universe she wants responsibility, right? She wants something to look after. So, somewhere between no pets in this house and a fluffy long-haired kitten, can we find something that meets my needs of low maintenance, low allergy, low responsibility, low cost, gives her companionship, gives her something to take care of? What do we got? What could we do? A plant? Sure. Those fuzzy ones with the soft leaves, why not?
A goldfish.
A goldfish, right? Low responsibility. Maybe an outside cat. Maybe a hairless cat. Whatever. I mean, once we move past the yes to pets, no to pets, we can come up with a whole bunch of things that meet both of our needs, right? I usually have a picture of her with a fluffy long-haired kitten, but I took it out for this presentation. I'm a horrible negotiator. She totally ended up with exactly what she wanted. Yeah, but honestly, that cat is like my favorite mammal in the house because it doesn't need to be driven anywhere. It doesn't want money. Yeah. So the important thing to remember is that you have multiple interests. The other side has multiple interests. When you take a stance, you probably have a couple of different reasons for taking that stance, and they do too. It's important to figure out what your interests are and then try to figure out what theirs are by asking questions, by thinking about what you already know about what's going on, and having a conversation about those interests. I would tell, the kid I'm negotiating with, look, I'm worried about allergies, I'm worried about your brother having an asthma attack. I mean, it sounds like I'm piling on, but I'm just being clear about my concerns, okay? Once we can do that, then we can have a better conversation about, okay, what else can we do? All right, that's a quick little look at interest. So the third step of this interest-based negotiation then is to generate a whole bunch of options before we decide what to do. This is hard for people to do because it's hard to come up with a bunch of silly ideas that are never going to work. I know if we just did this, we could solve this problem, right? The key here is the more options we come up with, the more likely we are to find one that works for all of us. So when I'm helping people negotiate over a shared road, and they're trying to figure out how are we going to maintain this gravel road that we both use. We're going to talk about let's hire somebody to come in and maintain it, even though that's going to cost, $50,000. Everyone's like, oh, that's way too expensive. I don't care. We come up with as many options as we can. We don't judge these options right now. We're just brainstorming. We're coming up with as many ideas as possible. Let's call our county road and bridge and find out how much they pay people, every summer to maintain things. Let's call a neighbor that has a similar situation, find out how do they maintain their road. Let's talk about 1 year you cover all the costs, the next year you cover all the costs. As many options as we can come up with, right? Like I said, this is tough. Being creative when you're in this stressful situation is difficult, but the more options you come up with, the more likely you are to find one that works. Okay, one of the key things I like to do when I'm trying to get people to brainstorm is set really short limits. Let's come up with 5 ideas in 5 minutes. Let's come up with 10 ideas in 5 minutes, whatever it is. Throw as many ideas as there are up there. We call other experts. We Google stuff, right? We just want to come up with as ideas as we have. And like I said, the key thing here is no judgment. So our last step in this process then is to use this objective criteria. Objective criteria can be 2 things. It can be fair standards and fair processes. So fair standards would be things like Kelley Blue Book, something that everybody can recognize is a fair, everybody can agree that whatever's in Kelley Blue Book is probably accurate. The problem we have is most of our negotiations don't involve something that has that sort of official standard that we can find. So then we move to the fair processes where we take turns, or we agree that the majority rules. We're all gonna vote on this, the thing that gets the most votes, that's what we're gonna do. We can take turns, we can, look for consensus. This is a harder one, because when I think about the kinds of conflicts that I help with in ag, there's not always gonna be that fair standard that we can rely on. John and I were talking earlier, I helped mediate a farm lease scenario last year where it was a landlord and a tenant, and they were trying to renegotiate the lease, and they couldn't agree on what a good number would be. It was actually like a crop share kind of situation. So I'm calling extension offices to find out, do you guys have a standard of what somebody in this exact situation would be paid for this kind of crop, just to come up with other examples that they could use. We did a lot of Googling. We looked at, the problem it was such a specialized crop, it was hard to find other information, but that was something that if we could have found a site that they both agreed was neutral, or if we could have found some statistics that they both agreed were good, we could have used that. The key thing here with those fair standards is that both sides do have to agree. Because you can find, if you're selling a car, you can find somewhere that says, yeah, this is a good price. And the other side's gonna be like, no, I found this site that says this is a good price. It has to be something that both sides agree to, okay? Questions about that? One of the things we find as people go through this kind of a negotiation, as you get to the end of it, sometimes that style you had originally comes out. If you're that avoider, you might be like, oh, I don't know if this is gonna work for me, I'm gonna act like this isn't happening anymore. Or if you're that competitor, you can see, okay, I'm gonna figure out how to win this thing. What we do in that is just slow the process down. Look how far you've come with this negotiation, kind of answer those what ifs, play the devil's advocate a little bit, and just get back to where you can feel comfortable with how the negotiation is going on. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about mediation, even though I've talked a bunch about it already. This is another step in resolving conflicts. We hope that parties have tried to communicate with each other. We'd like that they tried to negotiate, and for whatever reason, they couldn't come to an agreement, so now they can go to mediation. We've had it called meditation, we've had it called mitigation. It's not some weird process where we light candles and make people hold hands. It's really straightforward. You sit down with a mediator, the mediator asks what's been going on, you get both sides of the story, you develop a list of issues that people want to talk about, and then the mediator helps you work through those issues. We mediate everything from, like I said, neighbor-neighbor issues, farm credit. When people have apply for a program through any of the USDA agencies and they don't get accepted in that program, they can request mediation to get more information. We do a lot of work in farm and ranch transition, whether it's grandpa died, left the farm to 3 siblings who do not want to work together. They use mediation to figure out how we're going to divide up this operation so that everybody gets a part that they're happy with and everybody moves on. And then more and more, we're working with those families before anybody has died. We need to transition this farm or ranch to the next generation. They use a mediator to help them have those hard conversations. So it can be used for a lot of different things. Mediators aren't judges. We're not deciding who's right or wrong. We're just helping everybody come up with something that they can live with, okay? Tool to keep in mind, at this point in time, this is a free service provided by the Department of Ag and the U.S. Department of Ag, so there's no costs associated with it, and the mediators come to you. Finally, litigation. I'm not a lawyer. I'm related to lawyers. We encourage people to communicate, to negotiate, to mediate, but we recognize that there are some situations where you need a judge to tell you this is who's right and this is who's wrong. In Wyoming, you can go to the state bar website and they now have a search tool where you can either type in your location or the area that you're needing a lawyer in, and it'll give you a list of folks who are, they're not accredited, but who specialize in those kinds of things. There's also small claims court, so if you have a dispute over, I think it's under $10,000, I don't know what it is anymore. You can take that to small claims court. You don't have to have a lawyer for that, and you can have a judge say, this is who's right, this is who's wrong, and this is how much that person has to pay. So again, I think a lot of the stuff that you may face, you can get resolved through those other ways, but this is always obviously an option, okay? And then finally, there's my contact info. If you have a situation that pops up and you'd just like to talk with somebody about it, you can always reach out to me. I keep those confidential. I can help you find some resources. I can help you figure out how you want to broach a difficult topic or whatever it is, and can talk to you about some of these other options. So, any questions for me? I'm getting you guys out of here a little bit early. Look at that. Such a fast talker.
Do you do presentations for county commissioners?
Absolutely. I'd love to. Yeah, for sure. I used
We might
to.
be calling on you.
Sure. I used to go to the county commissioners conference every year. I haven't gone in the last few years, but I do like to reach out to folks like that, because county commissioners are the ones who get the calls, right, from people that are like, fix this problem for me. Here's a possible resource. Definitely.
Thank you.
Sure. Anything else? Any questions about any of that, or wondering how it applies to situations you might be involved in?
Well, sometimes I rent out my pasture, and the problem we have is we forget what the other guy said. And so I've learned that we need to put it on a yellow legal pad, bullet point it.
Yep.
And both of us sign off, give
Yep.
each other a copy.
Right.
And it helps solve a lot of that
Absolutely.
up front.
It really does. I'm glad you brought that up. Follow that up with an email. Even if you don't have a yellow pad, here's what I took away from our conversation yesterday. Does that sound right to you? That way you're both on the same page. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Good
Fences,
tip.
rent, and water.
Do you make them, are they in charge of maintaining the fence?
Excuse me?
Do they fix the fence when they're renting from you?
I've tried to require that, or at least provide the material, they do the work, or I do the work, they do the materials,
Sure.
something to that effect.
Sure. I do consider myself somewhat of a fence law expert, even though I'm not an attorney. I've had enough issues over the years that I've gotten pretty good at, fence in, or fence out for cattle. I don't want your cattle on my land. It's my job to fence them out. It's fence in for everything else. Sheep, horses, goats, domestic yaks, whatever, everything else. And especially people that are new to the area hear fence out and they think, oh, that means everything. No. And within that fence out, I also can't allow my cattle to knowingly trespass. So if I keep pushing them in an area that I know I'm not supposed to have them in, that's still my responsibility to keep them out of there. It's really,
There is
It's-
such a thing as a legal fence.
and there's a definition of a legal fence, absolutely, yep, yep. And I don't think there's any this year. The legislature always has some sort of fence, either with like new subdivisions, changing who's responsible for the fence. I think there is something this year in making state lands responsible for fencing some of that stuff. I don't know if that bill made it through yet or not, but it's a huge issue. And then we have the fires this year that burned a bunch of fence. I mean, it's always something, yeah. Anything else? Anything I missed? Questions you have? Well, thank you guys. If you'd like a copy of these slides, just shoot me an email and I'll send them to you. And I'll stick around for a few minutes if anybody wants to chat. So I think lunch is next. Go get something barbecued, right?
Thank you.
Sure. I've got some at my booth. But yeah, take a picture and contact me. Absolutely. Proof of life. As little as possible. I'm horrible with selfies, but my teenagers will attest. Thank you guys.